We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight with me, Andrew Doyle, in the big question. After today's abortion ruling, the United States, was the Supreme Court right to overturn Roe versus Wade? We'll also be speaking to the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Vince Cable, following last night's by-election results. That's just after 10 p.m. In the news agenda, the man who claims he is suing the NHS after regretting gender reassignment surgery. How much is too much to spend on trees? And the woman thrown out of a restaurant for wearing a short skirt. Plus, my all-star panel of author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie McKenzie. I'll see you after the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Andrew, thank you. I am Bethany Elsey, here to get you up to date from the GB Newsroom. Missouri has become the first state to ban abortion after the US Supreme Court overturned the landmark ruling that gave women the legal right to choose. The Roe v. Wade ruling legalised abortion nationwide in 1973. The Conservative majority court has chosen to give individual states the power to determine their own abortion laws. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, described the move as a big step backwards, and over 100 people are protesting outside the US Embassy in London tonight. US President Joe Biden says it will have immediate consequences for millions of women.
State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child.
Boris Johnson has said voters can beat him up all they want, but that he'll keep going as Prime Minister after his party suffered a double by-election defeat. The Conservatives lost the Devon seat of Tiverton in Honiton to the Liberal Democrats and Wakefield in West Yorkshire to Labour. The losses prompted the resignation of the party co-chair, Oliver Dowden, who said Tory supporters are distressed and disappointed and that somebody had to take responsibility. Boris Johnson denied his premiership had been dealt a blow.
My attitude to by-elections, if governments crumpled because of by-election results in the whole of the post-war period, we wouldn't have had many post-war governments. And that, I'm afraid, of course, we need to listen to the messages that we're getting. We need to learn. But in the end, we've got to get on and deliver for the British people, and that is what we're doing.
The governor of Luhansk says Ukrainian troops defending the city of Severodonetsk are set to be pulled back. After weeks of fighting and bombardment, the city in the eastern Donbass region has been reduced to rubble. The city would be a significant strategic gain for Moscow as it continues its offensive to capture the entire Donbass region. A fresh alert has been issued to train passengers amid concern many won't cancel day trips or weekend holidays despite another day of rail strikes tomorrow. 40,000 RMT union members at Network Rail and 13 train operators will walk out for a third day this week in a dispute over paid jobs and working conditions. Just a fifth of services will run and half of lines will be closed. On TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Andrew.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. Coming up on tonight's show, in the big question, was the Supreme Court right to overturn Roe versus Wade? The decision that enshrined in law a woman's right to choose whether to have an abortion. In my big opinion, I'll be discussing whether a court in Europe should be overriding our government and judiciary. Coming up in the news agenda, pressure is on the Prime Minister as the Tories lose to the Lib Dems and Labour in the latest by-elections. We'll be joined by Sir Vince Cable on that. And with me throughout the show is, of course, my brilliant all-star panel of author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie McKenzie. We also want to hear from you throughout the show, so don't be shy, send us an email. That's gbviews@gbnews.uk. As we know, last week the European Court of Human Rights ruled that the UK's government's plans to transport migrants to Rwanda must be stopped. This, in spite of the fact that our elected government had put the plan into place and challenges to the policy had already been overruled by the High Court. In other words, all of the proper democratic routes had been taken and a decision had been reached. It was then overruled by an unelected judge in Strasbourg. So let's leave aside just for a moment what you think about Priti Patel's Rwanda policy. I, for one, am not in favour of it. I think it's a short-term solution that fails to address the actual problem. But I am troubled by the idea that under the current system, a court in Europe can override our government and judiciary. Not only that, but the European Court of Human Rights has refused to identify the judge who made the decision. So not only is there no accountability, there's no transparency either. Yesterday, the Daily Express interviewed one of the court's judges, Latif Husseinov, who said that as it was a public decision, the name of the judge really should be published for the sake of transparency. And of course, he's right. But beyond that, should we really be outsourcing our decision-making to a foreign authority? A lot of critics of the European Court of Human Rights have drawn comparisons with the EU, for good reason. Of course, the European Court is not part of the EU. It was established in the 1950s in order to protect the rights set out in the European Convention on Human Rights. It's not to be confused with the Court of Justice of the EU, which since Brexit has no jurisdiction over the UK. But the principle is similar. It's the principle of democracy. People often assume that the Brexit vote was all driven by a concern over immigration. But we know from the Ashcroft polls after the referendum that the number one reason why people voted to leave the EU was the principle that the laws that govern this country ought to be made in this country. Sovereignty, in other words. It was always difficult to calculate the exact percentage of UK laws that had originated from the EU. This is because most EU regulations didn't require new laws in order to be implemented. So while roughly 13% of UK laws between 1993 and 2014 were directly influenced by EU law, it could be as much as 62% that were implementing EU obligations. But whichever way you measure it, a substantial amount of our laws were originating from overseas, and that was why we left. This isn't about jingoism or xenophobia. It's about the fact that the only guarantee against the corruption of those in power is the right of the demos to vote them out. I'm reminded of Tony Benn's 5 famous questions, which he said ought to be asked of anyone in a position of economic, social and political power. These are, what power have you got? Where did you get it from? In whose interests do you use it? To whom are you accountable? And finally, how do we get rid of you? That's probably the most important question of all. And we considered these questions when we voted for Brexit. And we should consider them again when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights. Consider the roster of prominent figures who have been attacking or attempting to thwart the government's Rwanda resettlement policy. The Prince of Wales, the Archbishop of Canterbury, members of the House of Lords, all of them unelected members of an elite class. As for the government, they have an 80-seat majority and 14 million people voted them in. I didn't vote for them. I don't support many of their policies. But I care more about the principle of democracy than getting my own way. Maybe the solution lies in the new British Bill of Rights that will ensure that Parliament and the UK courts are the ultimate arbiters when it comes to which European judgments we accept. By all means, we should criticise the government, hold it to account at every opportunity. But let's not offer our support to unaccountable powers overseas who wish to overturn the decisions made by our democratically elected representatives. Reacting to my big opinion and joining me throughout the show is my all-star panel. Author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, plus journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie McKenzie. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I'll come to you first, Laura. Do you have any thoughts about the European Court? Do you think it's about time that we just detach ourselves from all of these foreign bodies that seek to impose their power on our own sovereignty?
Yeah, I agreed with what you said completely about the accountability and the transparency. I think that's a key issue, not to even know the name of the judge. I mean, this is a ludicrous situation, but it's not just an issue of sovereignty for the United Kingdom, but for every country in Europe. This affects all countries. I don't think that an unaccountable court should be dictating rather than, softly influencing every country in Europe. And I'm sure we're going to touch on Assange's extradition tonight as well. And, there are a lot of issues touching on sovereignty in the news at the moment. The idea that the US can extradite UK citizens, I know Assange is not a UK citizen, who've committed crimes on UK soil seems to me to be a travesty.
Tommy, can I come to you next? Is there a sense in which people just don't trust, when it comes to human rights, they don't trust the UK government and they would rather have a court in Strasbourg making those decisions for us?
I think, look, it's like a second opinion. It's always good to kind of know, what a broader picture or if there's any points that we kind of may have missed from our own government. But we voted our people in. We voted our government in. We trust in the system that we have in place. I don't understand why there's a third-party involvement element here. It's a bit like, my house is my house. I'm very much connected to my wife's parents, but if they came along and told me how to order my garage or my shed or my kitchen or anything else, I'd have an issue with that. I'll respect rules on a broader scheme. I'd respect what other people are doing. But ultimately, it's my house, my rules, my decision, and I think that's the way it should be run here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, though, isn't it? Because a lot of the people cheering on the court's ruling tend to be the ones that oppose the Rwanda policy, and a lot of the people complaining are those who think the policy should go ahead. So it's very much people seem to like these big overarching decisions when they go their way. Aggie McKenzie, would you have any thoughts about this ruling?
Yes, I think it's our government are taking a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to what Strasbourg is saying and trying to come up with their own ideas. And I think that at the moment, we shouldn't be changing anything. I think that the current government, they're a set of children, and I think they shouldn't be allowed to just change things at the moment. I think it's too delicate and too dangerous for big things to change at the moment while it's so fragile.
But Aggie, you say that they're a group of children and they can't be trusted to change things, but they are a group of children who we voted in order to make decisions on our behalf, right?
Things have changed an awful lot since the government was first voted in. And we all know that the Prime Minister has been teetering on the edge of being chucked out for a very long time. And he's only hanging on because his skin is very, very thick. No. If he had any sense and any sense of decorum and manners, he would go.
So, Laura, do you think there's a case there? I mean, following on from what Aggie's saying, so effectively, Boris Johnson no longer has credibility, and so therefore he shouldn't be entrusted with the typical decision-making of government. Do you think there's any credence to that?
I don't think it's even a related issue. I just don't think a court that is not accountable to us and isn't transparent to us should make decisions that affect UK decisions.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
so
that
Aggie,
simple. It shouldn't be really about our elected leaders, because come general election we'll sort that out one way or the other. It shouldn't be about whether you like the ruling of the ECHR or not. It should be about the principle of it.
Aggie, can I ask you specifically about that? Does it not concern you slightly whenever a nation is outsourcing its decision-making capabilities elsewhere? Don't you think
it's
there's an issue with
not outsourcing
sovereignty
its
there?
decision-making capabilities. I think the UK is part. OK, I'm somebody who didn't vote for Brexit, and I think that was I very much regret the decision that came to in the UK. But I still believe that we should be part of a bigger thing. I don't think that the UK on its own is. I think it's unhealthy for us just to be making our own decisions about international questions.
Yeah, but that's why we vote in these people that we supposedly trust. Tommy, do you feel that there's an argument to be made here that our leaders are just not there to be trusted?
Look, the impact of the Rwanda decisions have an effect on other countries and countries outside of us. So therefore, it's a decision that we need to kind of come to and work with other countries. But I don't like the idea of a ruling coming in and just superseding what we've elected certain people to make decisions for our country for. So it's that element that I think it makes everyone feel a bit uncomfortable, because I don't know about you, it feels like one of the big underlying issues that we have here in this country right now is what decisions can we really make? How much is in our power? What can we do? What can't we do? What can we say? What can't we say? So much is being taken away from the individual that this just feels like just another one of those things which is like, well, let's just hand this over to somebody else to make on our behalf. No, I think people can make our own decisions. We should make the right decision with Rwanda and what we're doing, but that shouldn't come down to a court or a group of people anywhere outside of this country.
But Aggie makes an interesting point about a breach of trust. Do you trust the government, Tommy? Do you trust them at the moment, in the wake of Partygate, in the wake of everything else?
I think there are elements. Look, there's lots to that question. You can't apply the level of trust across everything the government do. There's clearly some levels, some people performing in a way that isn't trustworthy, but there's a lot of good that's been done as well. And I think it's very easy for the negative to stand out way more than the positive. But I think there's a lot of questions to be had. It's not a clear-cut yes or no. I think I've got my questions around it, like many people have.
And I believe that actually the ruling of the Supreme Court is not, it's not binding. It's actually not binding. So it's everything's in flux, isn't it?
Well, you say it's not binding, so you, in that case, we could just ignore it, right?
Well, if the government chose to, it could do.
Well, that's what they're proposing with the Bill of Rights, isn't it? That once we've introduced this British Bill of Rights, we'll effectively have a situation where we don't have to leave the European Court of Human Rights. It's still there. We can still, receive their counsel. But we would be in a position to say, actually, some of these decisions we don't agree with. And surely that strengthens our democracy, doesn't it? Because it means that we have the decision-making powers here. Laura, what do you think about that? Do you think the British Bill of Rights is a good proposition? Do you think this is a sensible way around this?
I'll be honest, I haven't read it, and I know that opinion on it is very polarised, so I'm not really up to speed with the Bill of Rights. But I want to come back to this issue of trust, because I think that we shouldn't let a lack of trust in our current leaders colour our view of being bound by ECHR decisions.
Because you don't trust our government, do you, Laura? I've read enough of what you've written and said to get the sense that you think they can be quite manipulative when it comes to certain issues.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, some people doubt whether Rwanda was ever even intended to go ahead. I don't know. I can't look into the hearts and minds of the ministers involved. But I don't think that abandoning the Rwanda policy and following the ECHR is going to go down very well with most voters, because Brexit was voted in, and that really was essentially about sovereignty. That's what people want. They want sovereign laws.
Yeah, and I mean, it caused an awful lot of resentment when people tried to overturn it. So we might have echoes of that when it comes to this debate. Anyway, we have to move on for the time being. Fascinating topic. But coming up after the break in The Big Question, after today's abortion ruling in the United States, we ask, was the Supreme Court right to overturn Roe versus Wade? See you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight. I'm Andrew Doyle. I'm sitting in for Mark while he's off gallivanting. And you've been getting in touch and sending us some emails. Thanks for that. Let's have a look at what you've been saying. We've got Ian here. Unfortunately, Andrew, our elected MPs and PM were elected on a manifesto they are not sticking to. Well, there's nothing new about that. Let's be honest, I think pretty much every elected political party has a similar situation. We've got another one here from Wayne. Wayne says Dominic Raab has been working on the British Bill of Rights for a number of years. It's not knee-jerk. We need to be in charge of our own laws. I think that's eminently sensible. And Richard says, for someone to say that our UK democracy isn't safe to make decisions affecting its citizens is ridiculous. How many members of the EU have such a legacy of continuous democracy? Lots of food for thought there. Keep those coming in. There was a landmark ruling made in the United States today after the Supreme Court overturned a 50-year-old law that legalised abortion nationwide. The court struck down the landmark Roe versus Wade decision weeks after an unprecedented leaked document suggested it favoured doing so. The judgment means millions of women will lose the legal right to abortion. So, this is the big question. Was the Supreme Court right to overturn Roe versus Wade? I'm joined by journalist and author Hilary Freeman and author Lois McLatchie, Communications Officer at ADF International, which is a faith-based legal advocacy organisation. Thanks very much for joining me today. Hilary, I'm going to come to you first, if I may. Obviously, this is a topic where emotions run very, very high. A lot of people are upset, but I do want to hear both sides of this argument. Now, for you, you feel that this is a terrible decision by the Supreme Court, am I right?
It's absolutely horrific. It sets America back more than 50 years. To me, it's not that much different from what's going on in Afghanistan with the Taliban. It's a complete blow against women's rights. It's going to cause untold misery. It's going to lead to lots of death, poverty. It's just horrific.
I mean, that's quite strong words to compare it to the Taliban. I mean, but you feel that is a woman's right to choose, autonomy over her own body.
Autonomy over her own body. This is basically the state now has rights over a woman's body. A woman doesn't have the right to choose what she does with her own body. Men don't have this, only women. And this is just because a group of far-right conservative Republicans who are religious and think that women shouldn't be allowed to have abortions. It's not what America wants. It's what Trump wanted. He voted them in, and you know, they've basically screwed women.
Now, they would very much dispute the designation far right. They would say that's not the case. I mean, it sounds like from what you're describing is that you feel that we have effectively an activist court in there now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a democracy, is it? if you know, democracy if it speaks for the people, but I believe something like 65% of Americans believe in the right to abortion, and yet it's now, I think, already in just a few hours, there are 18 states where abortion is pretty much completely illegal. Women will not be able to have abortion.
Lois, can I bring you in here? So, you know, again, sensitive issue here, and you know, a lot of people are very, very upset about this. But do you understand that why people are so upset, and do you have any sympathy with their position?
Well, I think there's actually been a lot of confusion about what this decision was. This is actually a great day for democracy because the court returned this decision to democracy. If we go back 50 years ago to when Roe versus Wade was decided, that was actually made by 9 male justices, 9 male white justices of all people, for a decision that was to come over the entire country. And now the court have said that was a mistake to do it like that. It should be the will of the people in individual states to decide how they want to care for women and unborn children.
But what about Hillary's point that the majority of people just simply do not support this decision? So you have a situation where the Supreme Court is acting against the will of the majority of the public.
They're actually returning that decision, that choice to the public, and the public will be able to debate the ideas amongst themselves and vote for what they want to see in their state. But there is actually a significant pro-life movement at the moment. I think that there's more pro-life people than we expect. Here in the UK, 70% of women would like to see the gestational limit of abortion in our country, 24 weeks, lowered to somewhere lower than that protects babies from an earlier stage.
Let's take someone who is in Texas, say, and there are very few available clinics in Texas, and following this decision, there will probably be none. And then they have to travel an awful long way. And, you know, the point is that it will still go on. People will still secure abortions, whether it's legal or not. And isn't it better to have a situation where they can do so legally?
And you say you're pro-life, but actually you're not pro-life because a lot of women will die and a lot more children will die because of this. Not, you know, pro-life. It doesn't exist. Pro-life means anti-abortion. I'm pro-life. I'm pro-women's lives.
Data from around the world actually shows that abortion does not correlate necessarily with women. Legalization of abortion does not correlate with women dying from abortion. It actually has more to do with the health systems that are in place already to take care of women. I think by getting rid of or saying that abortion is no longer necessary, we want to be able to create a society where women are supported and their unborn children are supported to become mothers and to flourish.
But Lois,
that doesn't happen.
Can I ask you about this question, though? Do you accept, though, that once you criminalise abortion, it will still carry on?
I think that we have to not throw that around so much. I think there's a lot more...
but it's true.
But that's the main point.
It is true. It's a key point. In other words, what does this decision actually achieve in reality? What it achieves is it criminalises people who are going to go ahead and do it anyway.
But it can generate a lot. There's a lot of things that we criminalise and they happen anyway, but there has to be a standard in the law. And with that standard, we can bring in and support new policies, which will support women in a better way, that will support.
But that's not what's happened. In America, in the states in America, lots of states in America, they were waiting for this decision and they'd already got trigger votes done, so that it's already been banned. It's already illegal. In some states, you already can't have an abortion in 30 days' time. You won't be able to have an abortion for any reason whatsoever. I mean, you really think that it's right that a woman who is raped or a child who is impregnated or a woman who has some kind of disease which means that if she carries a pregnancy to term, she might die, shouldn't be allowed an abortion. But that's what's going to happen. And in countries where we have these laws already, where abortion is basically banned, women have gone to prison for having miscarriages.
Do you think that kind of scenario that Hillary's outlining is feasible, that might now happen? There is a risk that might now happen in America?
I think there's a lot of great work that is completely overlooked that is done by the pro-life movement so that women have that support. And my heart really goes out to women who are in very difficult situations, and I know there's women who face very difficult situations, but I think we can offer them so much more than abortion. I think we can offer people who have gone through traumatic issues so much better than just to say go and have an abortion, and that is going to be able to flourish even more, and that's already flourishing with the pro-life movement who have been active in many states over in the US, but also here as well, and it's something that can build to create a better.
Do you worry, though, you know, when we had the situation where in Northern Ireland it was illegal to procure an abortion and people were travelling over here and getting it done over here, and there was a real stigmatisation against people who did so over there, doesn't that concern you at all?
I think the Northern Ireland question is interesting because Northern Ireland didn't decide as a democracy to bring in abortion. And actually, they would have probably, according to polling, would not have brought it in if it was been done by democracy. And that was something that was imposed on them by the UK government at a time that their democracy was quite vulnerable. And it's good for these decisions to be made with women's input, and that's Roe v. Wade actually took that away.
And women in Northern Ireland died because doctors wouldn't give them abortions when they needed them to save their lives. I mean, it's just horrific. I don't think this is about babies and about fetuses and embryos. It's about women. And I think we've got to think, would you, and this is one of the famous abortion arguments, nobody would say to a mother, your child has got kidney disease, they need a kidney, you have to go and lie down on that table and I'm going to whip out your kidney and give it to your child and you have no choice. It doesn't happen. But for pregnant women, they have no rights over that. Even in this country, once you're 24 weeks, and except for certain circumstances, you don't really have rights over your own body. But if you ban abortion, you have no rights at all.
So this strikes me as getting to the heart of the dispute here, and you'll have to talk me through this because my knowledge of this is limited. I'm not someone who will be having a baby anytime soon. So
exactly, you're a man, and yet it's men who have made this decision.
Right, so there's that issue. So you very much, Hilary, if I'm hearing this right, you frame this much as a women's rights issue. Women should have the right for autonomy over their own bodies. Yeah. Lois, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but am I right in thinking that your concern is the rights of the unborn child?
No, my concern is for both, because I think both lives equally matter in a pregnancy. I don't think it was men that made this decision. There was the Supreme Court is more diverse than it's ever been, and there's plenty of women like me in the pro-life movement who want to see better for women, like my peers, like myself. So I think, but we can find a solution that protects the baby and protects the mother to both flourish.
But to clarify, so do you believe that life starts at conception?
Yes, I do.
And so that's going to be a fundamental distinction between the two of you, isn't it? Do you have a sense of when life begins, or is that too grand a question?
I don't think that helps the debate. I think, obviously, no woman wants to kill a baby, but and as far as I'm concerned, until the baby is viable on its own, can be born and is viable, then it's really the mother's life should come first, and the mother's right should come first. And what is the point of having a child who you're not going to be able to look after, who's going to be miserable, neglected, abused? And, people say, adoption. That's not that simple. It never has been. And, we've seen what happened in Ireland where women were forced to give birth and forced to give up their children for adoption. It's horrific and it ruins their entire lives and the children's lives.
So rather than see this as a pro-choice versus pro-life argument, isn't it right? I mean, you mentioned the phrase viability.
Yeah.
So isn't the debate really about at what point do we assign human rights to an unborn individual? And you mentioned viability, but can you put a date on that for me? Do you know when that is?
Well, we already have that in this country. We say 24 weeks.
But why?
Why? Because babies who are born before 24 weeks don't survive.
Except 21 weeks in a day.
Yeah, that's very rare exceptions. Even babies born at 24 weeks. My daughter was in the special care unit with babies who were born at 24 weeks. And believe me, they were there for 6 months and they had masses of problems. It's not as simple as saying, you can give birth to a baby at 24 weeks and take it home and it'll be fine. But the point is, even at 20, I actually personally believe, and this is perhaps quite a strong view, that abortion should be legal up to birth. I'm not saying that anyone should be able to abort a 39-week-old baby. But nobody would. But that would give women back the rights over their own bodies. So
you'd say that you shouldn't be criminalised even if you were to abort a baby right at the point of labour.
It doesn't happen. You're allowed to now for mental health reasons or to save your life or because the baby has severe disabilities. It hardly ever happens. There's about 200 abortions after 24 weeks in this country every year.
But surely you would concede that that is a viable individual with human rights at that point, surely?
Yes, and what would happen then is that usually the mother would be counselled and she wouldn't do that because actually, if you have an abortion at that stage, it actually means giving birth anyway. So if the mother realised that she had to give birth anyway, she wouldn't have an abortion. But the fact is, it shouldn't be about the law. It should be about medicine and what doctors talking to the mother and the mother deciding.
I'm just slightly confused because if you're making it legal to abort right up to the point of birth, but you're simultaneously acknowledging that that is a human being with rights, isn't there a contradiction in that position?
No, because I believe that until the baby's born, the mother comes first. The mother's rights
so it's about
first.
prioritising the one over the other. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a sort of interesting development from the viability argument. Lois, do you think that there's any... are you persuaded at all by that point of view that there could be some situations where you have to effectively weigh up the rights of one against the rights of the other? I mean, that happens all the time, doesn't it, in ethical situations?
It doesn't often happen with the right to life. And this is a really key thing, because when it comes to the right to life, that is one of the most precious and important rights that one can have. And if we believe on the basis of human rights law and the human rights that we regard for all of our other, like freedom of speech, all of these other freedoms, we know that these exist because they're equal. I can have one opinion, you can have one opinion, we can both have the right to speak. In the same way, and I don't have that because I'm a woman, you don't have that because I'm a man, we have that because we are human beings. So if we take that down to its most fundamental reason, why do we have these rights? It can't be because of the situation we're born into. It can't be because of our wealth. It can't be because we're a boy or girl. It can't be because we have disabilities or not. It has to be because we are human, and that's why it's so important to make sure every human being is protected,
but Lewis,
no matter where they are.
You must accept that there are all sorts of circumstances where we do weigh up the rights of one individual against the rights of another, and you have to, even in childbirth, where there's a possibility that the child can end up killing the mother, and those decisions are made by doctors all the time. So there are circumstances, aren't there, where we have to think of those things?
Well, in situations where both will die and one is able to be saved, that's a completely different scenario from choosing intentionally to take the life of a child for that kind of reason.
But when you say that life begins at conception, I mean, we do have to reckon with the fact that in nature, new fetuses, new embryos are often dispatched quite mercilessly.
About half, I think.
So
people even don't even know they're pregnant.
So is this really the case is that the equivalent of a massacre? Are we losing all these individuals? I mean, or do we just accept that, no, that's part of life, that fetuses don't become viable until a later point?
So I believe that every single human being has rights, but a lot of what we were talking about here with the Roe versus Wade, to get back to this story, that is actually talking about children at a later stage. So we do have to be considering that abortions are happening to children at much later stages. Now, in America, the law that Roe v. Wade brought in put America into one of the top 6 most extreme abortion laws in the world. Included in that list were China and North Korea. And the US allowed, with Roe v. Wade, abortion up to birth. With this law, the states will actually, including Mississippi, who was at the center of this case, Mississippi will bring their law back to 15 weeks. The European average is 12. Mississippi is still beyond what we consider to be normative in Europe.
Hilary, do you want to come in on that one?
Well, I was going to say, comparing it to China and North Korea, I mean, China and North Korea forced women to have abortions. That's very, very different to, a land of the free, supposedly, which, this was a great ruling that supported that. This was a liberal society, and it's not anymore.
Do you fear that, I mean, we are in a situation of incredible political tribalism. And now if you've got a situation where each state is going to be able to make its own decisions about this particular issue, which, let's face it, has become rooted in a culture war issue, was often perceived as a culture war issue, are we going to be getting to the point where we are even more divisive than ever before? People are going to be moving to red states or blue states according to their political views. I mean, Biden talked about wanting to bring the country together. Yeah. Does this decision really help,
No,
Hilary?
not at all. It polarises it, doesn't it? I mean, you look at the map and there's kind of a bit around the outside where you're allowed abortion, and then there's all this stuff in the middle where it's now banned. And no, it doesn't bring America together at all.
Does that concern you at all, Lois? I mean, you must have seen this development.
I think that it shouldn't be like that. And I think, for example, we disagree on everything, but I think we both think that women's rights are extremely important, and we want to prioritise what's best for women. We see that differently. But there's so much more common ground than is often portrayed, especially with media hype, etc. So I think it would be great when we think about this in our own country, if we're really thinking of the ways to best prioritise people, women and their unborn children. And if we do that, we can find better solutions that aren't so polarised. Do
you ever worry with this debate, and often debates of these emotive kinds, that people do end up considering the other side to be just evil rather than incorrect? I mean, you two have managed to have a very sensible, civilised discussion about such an emotive, difficult topic. That, I'll be honest, I'm a bit nervous wading into, because it's not going to affect me. But
that's the thing, isn't it? It should affect men. Men should have to take more responsibility, and that's the problem. It's the woman who always gets stuck with the baby. Men should have to. When these rulings are made, why doesn't somebody say, right, I don't know, all men should have vasectomies until they are responsible enough to have a child? I mean, they're reversible, aren't they? There's an idea for you.
Goodness.
Then no one would get pregnant unless they actually tried to get pregnant with someone who also wanted to get pregnant.
I suppose the counter-argument to that is a vasectomy wouldn't involve another life, another individual?
Well, I would rather, I actually, starting from the same point, I'd rather see policies that promote fatherhood and promote men taking responsibility for their children. I think that'd be a great solution to try and end abortion together.
But I think, your ideas, there's nothing wrong with your ideas, but they're ideals, and the world has never been like that because we've been here before when abortion wasn't allowed, and all that happened was that women were going to, backstreet clinics and having coat hangers shoved up them and dying of infections. That's what's going to happen again.
Although
and it's
now
going to be the poor women.
Now, of course, people will be securing pills and things like this.
Yeah.
It will be safer, but I still feel it'll probably keep carrying on. If you criminalise, that is my feeling about this.
Yeah, and the poor women are the ones who won't be able to get on a plane and go to another state.
You mentioned something earlier, Hilary, about the fact that it was mostly men on the Supreme Court. But do you think that, just on a broadly philosophical principle, that men really shouldn't wade in on this debate? That actually this should be a debate solely for women to settle?
No, I think men should have a say, but ultimately not over women's bodies. Ultimately, it should be a woman's choice over her own body. It should be an individual choice. Of course, men are fathers. Some men are brilliant fathers. Some men, are brilliant doctors. They are allowed to have an opinion, but they shouldn't make the final decision, no.
OK. Final word to you, Lois.
I really back men getting involved in the conversation. I think this is something as a society we really need to realise that abortion is not good for women and it's not good for children. And we can find solutions together to make that not only not there, but unnecessary and unwanted as well.
Well, thank you to journalist and author Hilary Freeman and author Lois McClatchy, communications officer at ADF International. Thank you both for a very civilised debate, and I do mean that because it could have got, a bit more volatile. Coming up after the break, we discuss last week's decision to extradite Julian Assange to the United States with American author Ed Brodow and deputy editor at Spiked Online, Fraser Myers. Join me in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. And you've been getting in touch, emailing us. Thank you for that. We've got a couple of them here. Aaron says, yes, a great landmark decision for the USA. Roe versus Wade was one case years ago which led to the death of millions of innocent babies. Robert says, as an American, I believe decision is correct. It was not a decision about abortion, but rather about state versus federal powers. Abortion can now be decided at a state level and therefore closer to the people. That's an interesting take. This is a different Aaron now. We're not just going back to the same Aaron. This Aaron says, why kill their baby? There is adoption. That Aaron is a lot more concise than the previous Aaron. Now we move on to Jackie. Jackie says, we have officially returned to the dark ages. I cannot believe the abortion law has been overturned. Quite right, Hillary. It is men cancelling the female race so that we have no rights over our own bodies. So lots of passionate views, understandably so, from all sides of the debate there. Let's move on to something else. So last week, Home Secretary Priti Patel approved the extradition of the WikiLeaks co-founder Julian Assange to the United States. WikiLeaks said it would challenge the order, and Assange's lawyers have 14 days to lodge an appeal. Assange faces 17 charges of espionage and 1 charge of computer misuse. I don't know what that means. Maybe he spilt his coffee on his laptop or something. Prosecutors in the US say the Australian citizen helped US Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning steal classified diplomatic cables and military files that WikiLeaks later published, putting lives at risk. Now, to discuss this, I am joined by author of the best-selling book, In Lies We Trust, How Politicians and the Media Are Deceiving the American Public. That's Ed Brodo. And also Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Fraser Myers. Fraser, can I just come to you first? Is it not the case that Julian Assange broke the law and what he did was effectively a form of treason? I think we might have lost Fraser there.
It's important to make clear what Julian Assange is being charged for. He's being charged for publishing leaked information. He isn't being charged for hacking information or stealing information. His role in this case is to have published the WikiLeaks, essentially. And back in 2013, the Obama Justice Administration acknowledged that if they were to go down this route of charging him for espionage for this, they would also have to charge people at the New York Times, people at The Guardian, people at all the various newspapers who have then gone on to republish some of the information that Julian Assange revealed. You know, every publication in the known universe, practically, republished something that came from Julian Assange's leaks. So we'd be arresting a lot of journalists if we were to go down that route.
We are having some trouble with your imagery, Fraser, but we are hearing you loud and clear, so keep going. I'm going to bring in Ed Brodo at this point. Thank you for joining us. Do you accept this point, that what this is really about is a freedom of the press issue?
Because we have a kind of an overall attack on journalism, that journalists should be subjected to more regulation by the government, which I think is very, very dangerous. And I'm thinking about Tommy Robinson in your country. You would probably know more about that than I would, but wasn't Tommy Robinson arrested because he tried to take some photos in a murder trial or a rape trial?
So in that particular case, he was deemed to be in contempt of court because it was an active judgment and the judgment hadn't come down at that point.
Yeah, but the whole issue was whether or not a trial could be covered by journalists. And
so your view then,
the other side of it. I'm sorry.
Your view is that the attempt to extradite Julian Assange, therefore, is in effect punishing a journalist for doing his job. Is that the point you're making here?
I'm saying that could very well be the case. I don't know exactly what they're trying to get him for, but it would appear that they're trying to get him for doing what a journalist is supposed to do, which is be a watchdog. Now, unfortunately, journalism has kind of gone downhill in our country. Journalists no longer see themselves as a watchdog. Now they are, they've become the slave to ideology. So a journalist doesn't feel that he has to tell the truth. He feels that he has to be true to his ideology, which makes it tougher for us to support journalists. But I believe in the old style Edward R. Murrow journalism, where the journalist is protected from the assault by government. And I think in this case, we have a serious threat to journalism. The other side of it is we have our current president is now using the Justice Department and the FBI to attack people who disagree with him, to attack his political opponents. And I think that is a factor in this.
Let's just expand on this a little bit, because I think the points that you're making here are about the ideological drift of the media, and I think we can all see that has been happening. But when it comes to Julian Assange specifically, I mean, let's look at the accusations here. The accusations are that he, in effect, put people's lives at risk by releasing information that was meant to be confidential. So is it not the case that we can draw a distinction between what you perceive to be the government's attacks on a free press and actually the integrity of the intelligence services?
Well, see, that's the question. Who is it that put people at risk? Wasn't it Manning? Manning who put that information out there? He's the one that could arguably be called a traitor, let's say. But Assange is in the role of the journalist who is reporting what took place. And I think that's a very important distinction.
Fraser, am I right in thinking that you think that this is actually at the heart of this, that this distinction between reporting on facts, publishing them in the capacity as a journalist, and leaking confidential information, that there has to be some kind of distinction between the two?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we obviously would like to see probably more protection for whistleblowers, people like Bradley or Chelsea Manning. It's interesting that the Obama administration essentially set a record for going after whistleblowers using this same Espionage Act that's being used against Assange. I think they prosecuted 3 times as many whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than every kind of administration combined. So, you know, there is a danger there, but it's almost a separate danger. What the Assange case is really about is about free speech, and it's about, you know, do we treat people who publish information as if they are hackers, as if they are leakers? And it is confusing, I understand, in the case of Assange, because the company is called WikiLeaks. And, you know, he's not a conventional journalist. He has this kind of quite radical commitment to transparency, and people are free to disagree with that as they see fit. So I think that has confused the issue slightly. But really what, you know, as I said before, the danger is that Assange is essentially being prosecuted for publishing information that is true, that is embarrassing to the US government, embarrassing to both of the major US parties, the Republicans and the Democrats equally, embarrassing to the US security state and the military in particular. And I think there is a bit of a kind of, you know, sort of force field in mainstream journalism around those, around the security state. And journalists need to be maybe a bit braver in challenging those kind of powerful institutions. Generally. So I think that is another kind of problem in terms of where journalism is going. And maybe that's why a lot of journalists don't feel the need to speak out against this.
So, Ed Broder, can I bring you in here? To what extent do you think Fraser has a point here, that this is about what is embarrassing to the government, and that, in fact, there is an element of vengeance about all this? Because it does seem that, you know, Donald Trump seemed quite a fan of WikiLeaks, for instance, when they were publishing Hillary Clinton's emails, but not so much a fan in other cases. So is it just that he's given too many people a bloody nose?
Well, I agree with what this gentleman just said. I think that the issue has a lot to do with journalistic freedom and freedom of speech. And that's really what we're dealing with. It's complicated in this case because Julian Assange he's Australian, is he not?
Yes.
So he's not a citizen of UK. He's not a citizen of the United States. So where does it fit in all this? Are we allowed to go to anywhere we want in the world and say you're not allowed to print something that's out in the open? I think this is a very, very important issue.
Before I bring in my panel, before I bring in my panel, Ed Broder, I'd like to ask you though: is it possible for Julian Assange at this point to have a fair trial in the United States? We've already had Mike Pompeo of the CIA effectively saying quite openly that he's guilty. You know, surely this isn't a trial that can really go ahead with any integrity.
Well, that's what I was trying to say before, that we have a president right now who is using the enforcement sections of our government to go against his political enemies. So we're in an environment right now that is not favorable to free speech or to fair trials for anybody. And I think this would be a very bad time to take someone like Julian Assange and throw him into the vagaries of American jurisprudence.
Do you think, Fraser Myers, that Ed has a point here, that actually, neither government, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Joe Biden, free speech and press freedom in particular, doesn't necessarily flourish under either regime?
I think that's right. I think it's really important to see this as a bipartisan issue. So, while Biden is essentially doing nothing to overturn the decision of what was happening under the Trump administration. That was when Assange was indicted. And I think Mike Pompeo, who was head of the CIA and then became Trump's Secretary of State, is actually key to a lot of this. Because as you said, Andrew, he essentially said he was guilty. He labelled WikiLeaks a kind of terrorist organisation, a kind of counterintelligence organisation, treating it as a kind of almost like a foreign enemy rather than a journalistic outlet. And I think one of the things that really riled them up in particular was in 2017 when WikiLeaks and Assange published a lot of the details on how the CIA hacks people's computers. So there was a clear kind of motivation. You can see where Julian Assange has stuck the needle in and annoyed the security state to the extent that they would go after him in this way. And, so initially there was this computer misuse charge that you brought up that was kind of leveled under Obama around the time of the Bradley Manning trial. And since then, we've had these 17 other Espionage Act charges. And, those could possibly amount to 175 years in prison. So, this is a serious vendetta we're talking about. This is a man that is never going to be free if he ends up on American soil.
Well, let's bring in my panel here, author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie McKenzie. I'm hearing a lot of consensus here about the way in which the extradition of Julian Assange is a threat to free speech and freedom of the press. Does anyone want to defend the extradition out of my panel?
Well, I suppose what we can add is, look, I've been around journalists for 20 years, and it's the job of a journalist to do their due diligence on a story, to do their research, to make sure what they're reporting on has been carefully resourced. The problem with WikiLeaks and internet, even gossip pages, celebrity pages, is they're so quick to go to press. So I think there's a responsibility that falls upon a journalist's shoulders to know what they're reporting on, the knock-on effects of that, whatever the case may be. I think there's more to this in many ways. I just think Priti Patel just likes deporting people. She likes just kicking people out. This is just another one on the list. Like, tick, got someone else out the country. Right, let's keep going through that list. She's just on a mission herself. But other than that, I think there's a responsibility that all journalists should have when reporting.
Aggie McKenzie, I mean, Tommy makes a good point, in a sense. There wasn't much in the way of editorialising here when it came to WikiLeaks. It was very much just, let's throw all of the material we've got out there and see what sticks. So isn't there a risk there that people's lives can be put in danger, particularly when you're dealing with intelligence agencies?
Actually, what I'd like to say is that, yes, the US authorities are claiming that he was putting people's lives in danger, but not one person died as a result of his investigative journalism. That needs to be noted. And I think that it's really, really important, as Fraser says, that the work of good journalists doing investigative reporting is really important, and that needs to be preserved totally. And this man has now been in Belmarsh prison for 3 years without any conviction. He needs to be let out and put on a tracker. This is going above and beyond.
Laura Dodsworth, do you have any feelings about Julian Assange?
Yes. Well, first of all, he's in Belmarsh because he did abscond from his bail before, so that's unfortunate. But I agree with a couple of points Fraser made very strongly. He talked about embarrassment. I think that embarrassment is really at the heart of this extradition. Under a 2003 Anglo-US extradition treaty, it's agreed we're not supposed to extradite for political reasons. Now, the other point that Fraser made about embarrassment is mirrored in what did Assange do? Whether you see him as a champion of government transparency or a renegade who...
Sorry, Laura, I have to come in here because apparently your mic is not working, so we're not picking up on what you're saying. I'm sure you had some fantastic points, and we will come back to you, Laura, after the break, and we'll hear your thoughts on that. But Ed Brodo, I just want to come to you before we go. You've written a book, obviously, about the press. I mean, you talk about the partisan nature of the press and the ideological nature. Do you think we can ever get back to a point where the job of the journalist is to present the truth and not to tell us what to think about it?
Yes, I think we can get back to it, but it's going to be a long shot. The current environment is not in favor of that. the current environment, what they're teaching in the United States in journalism schools is that your responsibility as a journalist is to your ideology, not to the truth. So we have a serious problem right now that needs to be corrected. And I've been writing extensively about that. It's one of the problems that we're facing in the United States at the moment.
Ed Brodo, thank you so much. I have to cut in there. Thank you to my guests, author of the book In Lies We Trust, How Politicians and the Media Are Deceiving the American Public. That's Ed Brodo. And Deputy Editor of Spiked Online, Fraser Myers. And, of course, my panel. Coming up just after 10 p.m, we'll be speaking to the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Vince Cable, following last night's by-election results. A good night for the Lib Dems and puts a lot of pressure on Boris Johnson. I'll see you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. In a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by former Lib Dem leader Sir Vince Cable after the news that the Lib Dems won the seat over former Tory stronghold of Tiverton and Honiton in an extraordinary swing of votes, while Labour reclaimed its traditional seat in Wakefield. First, here's the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Andrew, thank you. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Missouri has become the first state to ban abortion after the US Supreme Court overturned the landmark ruling that gave women the legal right to choose. The Roe v. Wade ruling legalised abortion nationwide in 1973. The Conservative majority court has chosen to give individual states the power to determine their own abortion laws. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, described the move as a big step backwards. And over 100 people are protesting outside the US Embassy in London tonight. US President Joe Biden says it will have immediate consequences for millions of women.
State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child.
Boris Johnson says voters can beat him up all they want, but that he will keep going as Prime Minister after his party suffered a double by-election defeat. The Conservatives lost the Devon seat of Tiverton and Honiton to the Liberal Democrats and Wakefield in West Yorkshire to Labour. The losses prompted the resignation of the party co-chair Oliver Dowden, who said Tory supporters are distressed and disappointed and that somebody had to take responsibility. Boris Johnson denied his premiership had been dealt a blow.
my attitude to by-elections, if governments crumpled because of by-election results in the whole of the post-war period, we wouldn't have had many post-war governments. And that, I'm afraid, of course, we need to listen to the messages that we're getting. We need to learn. But in the end, we've got to get on and deliver for the British people. And that is what we're doing.
The governor of Luhansk says Ukrainian troops defending the city of Severodonetsk are to be pulled back. After weeks of fighting and bombardment, the city in the eastern Donbass region has been reduced to rubble. The city would be a significant strategic gain for Moscow as it continues its offensive to capture the entire Donbass region. A fresh alert has been issued to train passengers amid concern many won't cancel day trips or weekend holidays despite another day of rail strikes tomorrow. 40,000 RMT union members at Network Rail and 13 train operators will walk out for a third day this week in a dispute over paid jobs and working conditions. Just a fifth of services will run and half of lines will be closed. On TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now, let's get back to Andrew.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight with me, Andrew Doyle, sitting in. Big stories, big guests, big opinions. And we're going to be speaking to the political editor, Nigel Nelson, shortly after last night's by-election results. Later this hour in the news agenda, the man who claims he's suing the NHS after regretting his gender reassignment surgery. We'll be reacting to that story and others with my brilliant all-star panel, author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie Mackenzie. Plus, we'll have another topical game show and a look at tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with my full panel reaction. Now, before we crack on with our next story, Laura was cruelly cut off before the break as she was in full flow regarding Julian Assange. Sorry about that technical issue, Laura. We weren't trying to silence you. But did you want us to? Do you want to give your opinion now while your microphone has been fixed?
Yes, I was really ready to unleash, wasn't I? Well, I want to kind of echo something that Fraser was saying. I think this has really been muddied by whether you see Julian Assange as a renegade undermining national security or a journalist doing public service, work in the public service interest. The thing is, there's something about this that really does smell of political embarrassment. And, you know, you have to suspect that this extradition is motivated by the fact that he's put documents out in the public domain which really make the US administration and security state look bad. You know, let's not forget some of the things that WikiLeaks exposed, like the Guantanamo guide that showed that prisoners were barred from access to the Red Cross, and the gunning down of civilians in the Iraq War. So this doesn't look so much like an extradition as a kind of illegal political kidnap. And I know I put that strongly, but I think in the last 2 weeks, we've seen really grotesque manoeuvrings of the state. Within the space of a week, we've had Tony Blair knighted and Julian Assange extradited. Now, there was a petition of over 1 million people who stood against Tony Blair being knighted, and it was the Order of the Garter, no less, because some people see him as a war criminal. Whereas what Julian Assange did is release documents that really showed an underbelly of the security state in the war. So I think that these are very dark days, actually, for national press freedom and also for national sovereignty, because we shouldn't be extraditing somebody on political grounds.
But Laura, you do accept the need for national security, don't you? Particularly when it comes to intelligence.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that there's a need for national security, but those documents were in the public interest. And another thing that Fraser said before, which was acknowledged by the US administration, that if Julian Assange is indicted, then so must countless other journalists be indicted. Why are they not being indicted?
Yep.
This really smells of political embarrassment and a vendetta. And there's only the assurance that he may only serve 4 or 5 years of what could potentially be I think 175 years for all the charges that are stacked up against him. So I think it's embarrassing for us as a nation that we are extraditing him.
I'm going to have to move on from this point now. These points have been made very strongly. I fear there's been a lot of consensus here on this side. Maybe tomorrow I can have someone in who thinks they should throw him in prison and throw away the key. But we shall see. Anyway, we've got to move on to this question about the by-election, of course. Boris Johnson has vowed to keep going as Prime Minister after two major by-election defeats for the Conservatives. The Lib Dems won the seat over former Tory stronghold of Tiverton and Honiton. That was an extraordinary swing of votes. And then Labour reclaimed the traditional seat in Wakefield. The Conservative Party co-chairman Oliver Dowden resigned in the wake of the results, saying someone must take responsibility. It doesn't feel like Boris Johnson is really up for doing that. So joining me now to discuss this, we have got Britain's longest-serving political editor, Nigel Nelson. We were hoping as well to have Sir Vince Cable, although there are some technical difficulties. We might be getting him in a moment. Nigel Nelson, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Boris Johnson not doing so well, but it doesn't seem like he's really taking responsibility for this result, does it?
No, and the whole point of Oliver Dowden's letter was to actually say just that. When he talked about someone must take responsibility, that someone is obviously the Prime Minister, and instead Oliver Dowden became the sacrificial lamb who had to resign today. So, no, it is very much Boris Johnson's responsibility, and I think that the real problem about these by-elections is that it's not so much now just that Boris Johnson was fined over breaches of lockdown parties. What we're seeing now is a complete loss of trust amongst the voters. And where Tory MPs once saw Boris Johnson as a vote winner, he's now looking like a vote loser. And once you get to that stage, they're asking themselves, what's the point of keeping him?
Yeah, I mean, it does very much feel like often these by-elections are sort of an opportunity for the public to protest against the leader. Specifically, if you think back to 1990 when Eastbourne went to the Lib Dems, and that very much precipitated the turn against Margaret Thatcher. But is it not? It feels as though Boris Johnson just simply will not go down that route. He just won't entertain the possibility that he should be responsible and he should leave. How much longer has he got?
Well, that's a good question, because at the moment that there's no vehicle to remove him. I think that Tory MPs who wanted to get rid of him, and bear in mind, 2 in 5 have no faith in him any longer, as we saw from the no confidence vote. What they should have done is organise themselves better if they wanted it to be a success. They got the 54 letters in, or probably an awful lot more than that. But what they didn't get was the numbers that were needed to actually remove him. So, in other words, that they went too early. Had that no confidence vote be held now after what's happened in the by-elections, I think Boris Johnson would go. The only way I can see that's going to happen now is if the cabinet turned against him, rather like they did with Margaret Thatcher, and just say, look, it's time to move off the stage. Now, at the moment, there's no great sign of doing that. Obviously, a couple more cabinet resignations could actually do for him. But the next stage which becomes critical is when the Privileges Committee report in the autumn, and whether they decide that Boris Johnson deliberately lied to Parliament about number 10 parties.
Can I ask you, Nigel, what you feel that this result signifies for the Lib Dems? Because it's interesting, isn't it? They've had this is now their third sort of major by-election victory. They seem to be on a bit of a roll. Have they been forgiven for their coalition with the Tories in 2010? Have they been forgiven for their attitude towards Brexit, which was that we must overturn this democratic mandate?
I think you're right, that by-elections are a bit different from general elections, so I'm not quite sure they've been forgiven for either of those things. The reason that the Lib Dems did so well in Tiverton and Honiton is simply that they were the only party that people who wanted to register a protest vote could actually vote for. So you're talking about a constituency which is dyed-in-the-wool Tory. These are people who are not going to vote Labour. So the only option they had to actually send a message to number 10 was to vote Lib Dem. I don't think this actually means that the Lib Dems are having a great comeback at the moment.
No, it does suggest, though, doesn't it, that the Labour voters are quite happy to lend their support and vote tactically, because the Labour vote dropped significantly as well. So a lot of them were voting for the Lib Dems as well. But perhaps, let's just look at Wakefield. I mean, does this mean that the Red Wall can be rebuilt?
Yes, I mean, I think that there are signs of that. Again, I don't think that Keir Starmer has got an awful lot to celebrate about the Wakefield result. It's obviously great to get a Red Wall seat back again, and bear in mind that it should never have been lost in the first place, that had been Labour since the 1930s. But the result there doesn't actually show that Keir Starmer is making a breakthrough. This was very much, again, a protest vote, and people of Wakefield who lent their vote to the Tories last time have now simply decided to withdraw it and gone back to their natural political roots.
Right, well, joining the conversation now, I've got my panel, the author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie Mackenzie. Aggie, can I bring you in first? I mean, Nigel makes a fantastic point there about Keir Starmer. I mean, is Keir Starmer really a threat? I mean, we've got this, he's got one seat back in the Red Wall, but there's a lot of rebuilding still to do, right?
Definitely. I think that I agree with everything that Nelson. I'm so sorry.
It's Nigel Nelson.
Nigel. Yes, it's really clear that there's this big move against Boris Johnson. I don't think Keir Starmer is going to come up with the goods anytime soon. That's the problem for the Labour Party. They haven't got a good leader in place. So I don't know. I think we'll have to see what happens with the next by-election that comes along, and I think that will become clearer about which way the tide is turning.
Tommy Sandu, do you see any that the tide is turning towards Keir Starmer?
I don't know about the tide turning towards him. I think this is a broader issue with the Tory party. I think people feel that the Tories have probably lost their way. It's very easy to pinpoint it on Boris and Partygate and all that. I don't think it's about those issues. This is about a party that's kind of lost its core message in a way. It's kind of stopped being standing for the things that it was about a few years ago. So I think there's broader issues here. But Boris is the Teflon Don. Things don't stick to Boris. So if anybody can kind of turn a bad situation around, it's someone like him. I think that's kind of where he shines, always, when he's kind of backed into a corner. So this all amounting up might well just release the inner Hulk that is Boris Johnson.
Well, he's always got the advantage that, he's got a bit of a character about him. He's got a pulse, which is more than can be said for Keir Starmer.
And that's the problem. That's the main problem, because the electorate in the country, they are fed up with him. They totally are. All those Tories in the shires and, the strong Tory, historical Tory seats, they are totally fed up with Boris Johnson. But where's the alternative? That's the problem.
Laura Dodsworth, can I just bring you on this point? I mean, we forget how astonishing it was that the Red Wall collapsed. The people who voted in those constituencies, voting Tory for those people, the hatred, the visceral hatred, ever since Margaret Thatcher for the Tory party, it meant something. It was significant. And you don't just rebuild that overnight, do you?
No, but I think by-elections stand to get an awful lot worse for the Conservative Party. I think there are Tories that will never vote for Boris Johnson, for Conservative while Boris Johnson's the leader, because they're not going to be able to forgive the hypocrisy of Partygate. But I actually think most Tories would forgive if the Conservative Party started acting like Conservatives. Now, everybody always projects their own opinions onto by-election results, and I'm about to do the same thing. I'm guilty of it too.
Feel free.
I think that actually, if he did start behaving like a Conservative, if he dropped taxes and green levies so that the economy could be stimulated and grow, things would go an awful lot better, because you know what? It's all going to get a lot worse between now and the cold, dark winter when people can't afford to heat their homes and drive their cars. So I think that people would forgive him if he just grew a Conservative backbone.
Nigel Nelson, what do you think about this? Do you think Keir Starmer is the person who can bring Labour's fortunes round?
Yes, he can, but I think that we need to see more from him and a bit more vision about exactly what a Labour government would mean. I mean, the danger at the moment, from certainly if you take the lesson of these by-elections, is the choice is kind of between the least worst option. What Keir Starmer has to show is he is the best option. Yes, I think he can do that, but he needs to do more to actually do that. And I agree with Laura there. I think one of the problems with Boris Johnson is the feeling that he's not really a Conservative. So when it comes down to Conservative voters, they say, well, hang on. We went with Boris Johnson because he appeared to be a great campaigner. He won elections. Now he's not even doing that, and he's not a Conservative. Makes people feel, well, why are we voting for him at all? So what the Conservative Party has to do is return to its roots and get a Conservative leading it.
Couldn't the same be said for the Labour Party, though? I mean, the clue's in the name, Labour. They're meant to be sort of representing the working classes, and, they haven't been supporting people's right to strike. For instance, they seem to be embroiled in these culture war issues. Keir Starmer unable to tell us what a woman is, and most of his shadow cabinet seemingly struggling with that very basic question, all of which, surely, is alienating the traditional Labour heartlands.
Well, you could have said the same thing about Tony Blair. And the whole point that Tony Blair made was that the only way of getting a Labour government elected was to appeal to as many people as possible. That's why Keir Starmer is sitting on the fence over rail strikes. I would imagine his instinct is to support the workers there, but equally what he doesn't want to do is upset the travelling public who are suffering so much from the strikes. So he sits on the fence, but that's very much out of the Tony Blair playbook. Tony Blair was often accused of not being Labour enough, but he did win 3 elections.
Yep. Well, I mean, you make some very good points. I just wonder whether, as the sort of chief architect of the second referendum policy in the last Labour manifesto, Keir Starmer will ever be forgiven by, 70% of Labour constituencies voted Leave. It felt very much like a slap in the face to their core voters.
Yeah, but I do think that Brexit's happened, and we have to actually move away from that. I'm a Remainer. I lost the argument. I accept I lost the argument, and I want to see Brexit be a success. I still think it was a mistake, but we've moved on from there. So Brexit is certainly not the issue. And it wasn't the issue in these 2 by-elections. What you're talking about here is 2 Leave constituencies that have turned their back on Boris Johnson, who, of course, was the deliverer of Brexit.
Well, thank you ever so much to my guest, Nigel Nelson, political editor at the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People, and my wonderful panel. Coming up in the news agenda, a man who claims he is suing the NHS over gender reassignment surgery that he later regretted. And should councils be spending thousands of pounds on trees? See you in a minute.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. And thank you so much for getting in touch, by the way. We've had a few emails in. This one from Barry. As an American, I believe Manning should have been shot for treason, as he knew the sensitivities of the data. However, Julian Assange is a different situation, as he had no obligation to protect the information given to him. There's very much Barry's opinion there, very opinionated. From Barry, Stewart says it is the US government's fault that the classified information was leaked. The person who leaked should be prosecuted, not the journalists. He's been made a scapegoat for US incompetence. And we got this one from Warren. Warren says if someone steals secret information and leaks that information, and a newspaper or publisher makes money out of that stolen information, does that not make the publisher offence dealing in stolen goods? Interesting. So on to this story about the by-election. Andy says Boris will never step down. He will have to be dragged out of number 10. For the sake of the Conservatives, Boris must go. And Karen says, why does no one ever interview a man about an unborn child? It isn't his fault that he can't carry his child, but the new life is 50% his. Should he therefore have no say? The feminist mantra being my body, my choice. Very interesting. Joining me now in a moment, I've got my incredible panel, author and journalist Laura Dodsworth, podcast and TV presenter Tommy Sandu, and journalist, broadcaster and TV personality Aggie Mackenzie. So we're just going to go through some of these stories now. A man, this is a very interesting story. A man is claiming that he is suing the NHS after having his genitals removed during gender reassignment surgery, according to the Daily Mail. The unnamed man took to Twitter claiming that doctors did not prepare him for the drastic outcome of the surgery, leaving him infertile and feeling like a sexual eunuch. The NHS Trust was unnamed. We approached the NHS for comment, who said we would have to approach the Trust directly for a response, but of course the Trust is unnamed. So we are in a bit of a bind there. We do not know any more than what has been reported by the Mail. But this is an issue we expected to come up. Would this be a case of medical negligence? So I'm interested, Laura, let's come to you first. I mean, so we don't know who this is. We don't know which trust it's related to. So we're on safe ground. We can talk about this on a hypothetical level, right? So this is fine. We're safe. But we're getting more and more these stories of detransitioners. Yeah. So people who, when they're very young, they are encouraged, they're affirmed in their gender identity, and they're encouraged to go through these procedures. And then they later regret them. And they say, well, I was too young to consent.
And affirmed is the key word, because I think this is part of the issue with the medical pathway, and that has been to affirm people in their gender. Right. And not to question it too much, even though it could be quite multifactorial. So we know that people who present as trans, particularly young women, because there's been this huge explosion in young women going to gender identity clinics, can have backgrounds of sexual abuse and trauma. They could be neurally divergent, neurodiverse, or maybe have eating disorders and body image issues. It's complicated.
Well, we don't know enough, do we?
And we don't know enough because these people are not tracked. So when you get somebody who detransitions, who perhaps changes their mind, maybe they just stop taking hormones, they often don't go back to the clinic. Now, I worked on a project in 2020 for the Sunday Times with female detransitioners. So that's women who'd thought they were men and then changed their minds. Now, this is one of the most discombobulating and distressing projects I've ever worked on. The idea for me as a woman that I might have all of my female sexual organs removed and then change my mind and regret it. Imagine living with that for the rest of your life. This man is not alone. I spoke to other male detransitioners at the time, including a big group in the US, actually, who were bringing a class action against a surgeon. I have the utmost sympathy for young people who've gone down this pathway. You have to remember, these are fairly experimental surgeries.
Yes. But
and how can young people truly understand?
Well, we have people now, though, activists are now claiming that if a young person goes to a gender clinic, a paediatric gender clinic, and says, I think I'm in the wrong body, I think I'm a different gender, and you don't automatically affirm it, that is a form of conversion therapy. That's what they're saying. Aggie, do you worry at all about children who may be experiencing gender dysphoria and may be pushed into making the wrong decision?
I think what's gone on in the last few years is absolutely horrendous. It's really, really worrying. And I know that the Tavistock Clinic has come under huge sort of criticism.
Well, it's had whistleblowers, of course.
Yes, that's right. What I think is that young people who have presented as wanting to change their identity, they've been sort of, it's been gone along with far too easily. and then the mistakes are made, and then the whole thing is a nightmare, and it's just massive. And I think that much more thought needs to be, much more time needs to be given to these young people.
So, Tommy, I'm going to bring you in here because, I mean, Aggie says that you know, we need a lot more time to discuss that, but that is precisely what activists are saying we mustn't do, that we must affirm immediately.
Well, on that basis, this person here who had the surgery began their transition, I think, in their mid-20s. They're now in their mid-30s. That's 10 years.
Yes.
And they put off the actual procedure, the surgery procedure, for 2 years, according to the article, for 2 years because they weren't sure. So in those 2 years, you've got to do your research, right? You've got to do some homework. If you're going to go through this, and then now he's saying, I didn't know all this, I didn't know what the effects of it were going to be. I'm like, well, what were you doing for 2 years?
We're talking about probably, I mean, we don't know the specifics about this case, but we're talking about very young individuals, people who are children, effectively. Well, and can they be trusted to make those kind of decisions?
No, I'm unsure about all of the decisions that I make, even if is there anything I'm not sure about. And I think to put, for parents to encourage their children to go down a certain path and a school of thought at such a young age is probably a little bit foolish.
I saw some footage the other day about parents who were talking about how they knew their child was trans at the age of 2, and I just don't believe that is possible, frankly.
Of course it's not possible. And some of the signs that parents are told to look for by activists are things like playing with non-conforming toys, you know.
Like a boy playing with
boys'
dolls. Yeah.
I mean, this is just ludicrous. And in fact, it plays into really, dangerous and old-fashioned sexual stereotypes. I predicted this poor man whose story's in the Mail. We're going to see more of these cases as time goes on. And I think people will look back on this period as something as bizarre and dangerous as lobotomising people.
Well, are we going to see a whole range of lawsuits coming up? I mean, this is my thought.
Well, we already are. In the United States has been the Wild West of gender confirming surgery. And there are lawsuits in the United States, and we will see more of this. And ultimately, that is what will end up changing the landscape, the legal consequences and the money. And it's a shame it's that way around, but I think that's what's going to change it.
Final thought, Tommy.
Yeah, just should the NHS be even conducting these operations?
Well, they're very much influenced by Stonewall, aren't they? And Stonewall is telling them that they absolutely should, and so they're going along with it. And this is the problem. I think there is this kind of ideological capture at the heart of all our major institutions, but the NHS in particular. Anyway, we've got to move on because it's now at 10:30, so it is a time for a look at tomorrow's morning's papers, hot off the press. And we're going to start with The Eye, which runs with abortion banned in the US. That's the Roe versus Wade decision we were discussing earlier, and we will discuss again in a moment. On to The Times now. PM faces new Tory threat. That we were talking about that similarly just a moment ago when we were talking about the by-elections. Daily Mail. Javid, tell public the truth about anti-Tory pact. That's very interesting. Will there be a pact between Labour and the Lib Dems in the next general election? The Telegraph next. Tory rebels plot next move to unseat PM. The Guardian leads with Tory grandees tell Johnson after historic defeat, just go. And The Independent. Johnson in peril as Tories warn mood has shifted. There's a theme developing here, isn't there? We're going on to the Daily Mirror. Go now. They're not mincing their words at the Mirror. And now The Sun has Katie's jailbreak. So they've bucked the trend there. Well done. Well done. And, of course, in Headliners at 11 o'clock, they'll be taking a look at all of today's news stories and tomorrow's newspapers. That is at 11 o'clock. That's our paper preview show that is populated by comedians. Always a good laugh, always worth checking that out at 11 o'clock. We're going to come to you, panel, now. So I just want to talk about, the big story. Let's go for the Mirror. Go now. You know, the people are just losing patience with Boris Johnson, but most significantly, people within his own ranks. Tommy?
Yeah. I think it's bigger than Boris. I think the problem we're going to have is, I think people... there's something going on in life at the moment where we just like to point the finger, we want to scapegoat, we want to put it all on one man or one woman, and you can't. It's not just Boris. The problems. Do
you think these have been overblown, though? Like with Partygate, do you think there's been too much?
I do. I think these are unprecedented times. It's been crazy the last few years for so many reasons. Crazier than normal. If you look at over the history of time, over the last sort of 50, 60, 70 years, what's gone on to the planet, what's gone on to the people with COVID, and the changes in society, the changes in the world, what we can and can't do, technology, so much going on, green issues. It's a tough time to be the Prime Minister.
It is. Is anyone a Boris fan here? Can I draw on anyone No, dead silence. Well, let's defend him here.
It might be great socially.
I know that this isn't a popular thing to say because
Yeah.
people say you shouldn't keep a prime minister because the alternatives are too poor, but they are too poor.
They are.
And I stand by what I said before. If he actually grew a Conservative backbone right now, I think people would forgive him.
Well, let's try and defend.
I think they really would.
Let's defend him a bit. I mean, Partygate, it went on and on and on. A lot of people would say, well, look, he was breaking the laws, but a lot of us were, and a lot of us fell. And actually, the Labour Party would have pushed even further restrictions.
Of course.
So,
and Andrew, people are scapegoating him because they themselves don't want to acknowledge that everything that Partygate really revealed, which was that the people in the corridors of power with access to all the data weren't really that scared.
They weren't,
Because they were partying every Friday. And people
maybe they were drinking their sorrows away, you know?
People don't like to feel that the wool's been pulled over their eyes. They don't like the hypocrisy, but they also don't like the fact that they were misdirected, like watching a horrible magic trick. So that's what we do with scapegoats, you see. We send our sins out into the desert on the back of a goat.
And isn't there, I guess, it's a biblical image there.
That
is what scapegoat means.
That is what a scapegoat is.
Aggie, what do you think about this? I mean, look, Boris Johnson, however, he has got a lot of credence in the party for the fact that he did get Brexit done. That was what he ran. You know, you can't take that away from him, can you?
No, that's right. And also, COVID, he dealt quite well with that as well. There's lots of things that he did do well, but at the end of the day, he has lied on many occasions.
But there's nothing new there. We've known about his lies.
No, that's right.
People find his lies quite charming, actually, I would say.
But hold on, there's a limit to the number of lies. If they go on and on and on and on and on, and they're blatant, the electorate don't like that. I like the Mirror and the Express, both the same pictures on front,
yes,
and slightly different headlines. So, as you said, Mirror, go now. Express, funnily enough, doesn't say the same thing. Boris vows to fight the next general election and win. Oh, my God.
It's almost as though there's political partisanship among the tabloid press. What a surprise. Let's go on to the story about Roe versus Wade, because I think this is a really interesting one. And we had this longer conversation earlier about this, and it is a very divisive issue. And we got into this issue of, whether men should be able to have an opinion on this subject or not, whether it's the case that the Supreme Court is effectively a lot of men who are sort of imposing their will on women. For you, Laura, is this about women's rights ultimately?
I think the divisive nature of it is actually quite interesting to see from the outside, because fortunately this isn't our country where this is happening.
Yeah.
The governor of Mississippi talked about the fact that from today more hearts will be beating, and it's a joyous day. And then you've got the Democrat Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, talking about what a cruel judgment it is, and that American women now have less freedom than their mothers. Yes, of course it's a women's rights issue, because women should be entitled to safe medical care. Banning abortion doesn't stop abortion happening, it just means it happens more unsafely. Now, the United Nations says that anything from 5 to 13% of maternal deaths are caused by unsafe abortion. All that's going to happen is that more women are going to die alongside their aborted fetuses.
Tommy, were you surprised by the Supreme Court's decision? I know it was leaked early, wasn't it?
I think it's getting confusing because abortion's not banned in the US. It's an unfair kind of headline to go with. To say it's banned. Yeah. It's been taken down to state level.
Yes.
A lot of laws in America operate on state level, and we have to also, because we can't. We're a small land here, but 3 states is probably the size of Great Britain. And so they've got a population 3 times us. To make those decisions a bit more locally, I think makes sense because things will vary from state to state. People vary from place to place.
Laura, do you want to come in there?
What about women who can't afford to travel from one state to another to have their abortion? So when you talk about being a local issue, actually that affects more vulnerable and poor women the most. Not everyone can afford to just switch state. And, of course, some states will probably make it illegal to travel across state borders to get an abortion.
Yeah.
I don't think it is just a local issue.
Do you feel there are positives? Tommy's making the point, I suppose, about local governance and actually how that's quite important to the states. I mean, what's your view on this?
I'm absolutely horrified by this decision, actually. So it's talking about 13 states at the moment. Another 13 states will follow. And it's a fundamental abuse of human rights, this decision. It really is. For the Supreme Court to be, which is mainly made up of elderly men, dictating on how women should live.
But what about the point that my guest earlier made, which is Lois McClatchy was making the point that actually it's not just about the right of the woman involved in the pregnancy, it's about the right of the unborn child. Do you take that point as well?
No, I don't, because I think it's really important. I mean, 98% of abortions conducted in the US are done in the first trimester. So we're talking about a fetus here. We're not talking about a child. Let's not get emotional about it.
And the laws treated abortion rights in each trimester separately. Look, back in the 50s and 60s, it's estimated there were 200,000 to 1.2 million illegal abortions every year in the United States. It's now going to be more.
OK, a lot of food for thought there. But coming up in the news agenda, should a restaurant ask you to leave because of the length of your skirt? And tonight's Great British Game Show. Don't miss it.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. You've been getting in touch, sending your emails in. We are very grateful for your input. Let's hear some of your opinions. We've got Charles. Charles says, why does Biden think the child of a rapist deserves to die? I am truly baffled by liberal values. Surely we should decide whether abortion is acceptable or not at some age of a fetus. Whether it is the child of a rapist is surely irrelevant to anyone with an ounce of human empathy. This is obviously very passionate views on both sides of this debate. We're moving on to Richard now. Richard says, although Labour won the Wakefield by-election, it looks like they lost over 5,000 votes on their 2019 electoral loss, which is hardly a ringing endorsement. Dilraj says, as a lifelong Conservative voter, I am now deeply embarrassed and ashamed of Boris and his cabinet. He not only has lied about everything, but now Brexit that I believed in was a total fib and I fell for it. It's going to damage our country so much. I won't vote for Conservatives until Boris and his cabinet go. It hurts to say that. Barbara says, sorry, but major surgery for gender reassignment should not be done on the NHS. If a person chooses to mutilate their own body, they should have it done privately. There are thousands of people waiting for necessary surgeries. The NHS should not be put in this position. And moving on now to another story. So Blackpool Council has been accused of wasting public money after splashing out £174,000 for 6 trees to be planted, and the majority of the funding went towards creating an elaborate underground system so the trees can survive. Understandably, there's been a fair bit of outrage from the residents, one stating that the council thinks money grows on trees. That's a neat pun. So 174,000. That's a lot for trees, Tommy, do you think?
Just print some more.
Yeah.
I mean...
But hold on. So they've created an underground system for the trees to grow.
Apparently.
Don't trees...
No, for the water. This is for the irrigation.
So that's what it's all about.
It is confusing.
I think that money, 175 grand, could go towards outdoor space, places for black Poolians to hang out and play, and green space.
What is it
No,
about?
but trees are outside space. I have to say.
No, they're not. Trees are something that belong in an outside space. They are not outside space.
Yeah, but this is part of the landscape, isn't it? It's part of the...
Do you know, I have to say, given the amount of money that our government has wasted and just spaffed into the wind over the last couple of years, I can't get remotely agitated about spending £174,000 on trees. Look, first of all, trees are really good for the environment.
Yeah.
OK? They store carbon dioxide. Aren't we all supposed to be thoroughly worried about carbon emissions?
Don't cheap trees do that as well.
But the problem is that the roads and the pavements aren't water permeable. So if you want a tree to grow, you might have to put in an irrigation system with the way modern cities are designed. But not just that, it's proven that trees alleviate psychological stress. They make us feel better. They're good for mental well-being. They make cities look nice.
They do.
And they're long-term. Trees live for hundreds of years.
I come back to the price tag. Surely we can do this with cheaper trees.
Yes. Well, not cheaper system, actually. What you need to do in a place like, is it Liverpool, Blackpool? Blackpool. Get community group together so that they are organised to water those trees, so you don't need this, really expensive underground system. Also, it's clear that those trees shouldn't be in that place if you have to spend all that money with the underground system, the irrigation system.
We need
them somewhere else.
We need more intelligent city design, really.
We do.
But
did you see in Cornwall, they spent
there are no
80 grand on this terrible artwork recently in Cornwall this week. Did you see that?
Well, that's your view, it's terrible. Maybe it's not terrible.
I think it's pretty unanimous.
I think it's worse. Councils cutting trees down all the time.
Yeah, sure.
That costs money.
Yeah,
Let's stop spending money cutting down ancient, beautiful trees that brighten up the views and are good for the environment.
Absolutely. No, that's fair enough. We're going to have to move on to another story now. So this is a planned feature for Alexa. You know, that terrible device that you have in your houses for some reason that is always listening. This is something out of a sci-fi novel. So you will apparently have the ability to listen to your loved one's voices from beyond the grave. So what the company is promising is the ability to, what they describe as, make memories last. So in other words, you can provide a recording of a dead loved one, and Alexa will mimic the voice. So you can hear someone who has died from your family telling you what you need to do on your shopping list and this kind of thing. Now, am I the only one who feels that this is creepy as hell?
Yeah, no, there's a couple of immediate thoughts on this. I mean, first of all, it is strange, and I think it says a lot. It betrays a lot about our own emotional immaturity in a new technological age.
Yeah.
I mean, recently there was a story about how we might have AI babies in the future, not real babies.
What?
It's absolute nonsense, dystopian, misanthropic nonsense that we're going to have AI babies rather than real babies. But the idea is, your baby Tamagotchi will be a substitute for the real thing if you can't bear to increase your carbon footprint. This is in the same kind of ilk. But there's another thing as well, which is the idea of using somebody's dead voice. They're gone. It's a bit like when a hologram was created of, what's that fame? Tupac.
Yeah. Oh, they've done it for Whitney Houston as well.
I have to say, I think that's kind of disrespectful.
Yeah.
Somebody's gone. You shouldn't put words into their mouth or turn them into a performance.
So that's interesting, because they've done...
I don't like
They've done holograms of ABBA, but they're not dead, But,
But that will be with their consent.
They're with their consent, exactly.
When the person's died...
They're dead catchy. That's what they are.
OK,
their songs are dead good.
Would you have this? I mean, we've all lost people that we love, but to have the person speak to you from beyond the grave, wouldn't it freak you out?
No, it would absolutely freak me out. There's something really kind of dark about this. And I get the idea of wanting to make the memory of that person live on, but that's why we have photos. Yeah, exactly.
Photographs.
We have photos for that reason. This is weird.
Go on, sorry.
I agree. I think it's really bad for the grieving process as well.
Yeah.
I think you need to hold the person in your mind and your heart, but you shouldn't be listening to their voice.
OK, but do you remember, I was reading about this the other day because we were talking about it on Headliners. You know that station at Embankment where you hear that strange voice saying, mind the gap, in a very old-fashioned tone. And it's because it's a dead actor, and his widow specifically asked that they preserve that particular recording. So she goes there sometimes to hear his voice. That's why that's the only station where you hear it delivered in that intonation. And there's something quite powerful about that,
I think that's beautiful, but he really said that. He was really commissioned and paid to do that. It's an existing thing.
Yeah.
Actually, for a robotic AI voice to mimic somebody who's dead, it feels like there's something grotesque about it. And I'm going to go back to this idea about the babies. Some things in life we're supposed to experience in their fullness.
Yes.
You don't have a baby then freeze at age 9 because that's more convenient because puberty's horrible. puberty is horrible. But, your child is supposed to grow up and you go through all that pain of teenagehood with them. And it's the same with the grieving process. It can be long, drawn out, painful, difficult, but we're supposed to go through it. It's part of the tapestry of life. We're not supposed to freeze somebody's essence in an Alexa
But also, it won't
voice.
be their essence. That's the problem. It's just going to be this faint mimicry.
It's a facsimile.
And it's a bit like when they brought back Bob Monkhouse to do adverts against smoking because, of course, he died of cancer. And it felt kind of grotesque. I mean, that wasn't his consent. However good the cause was.
This is an audio version. This is an audio version of deep fakes. As we know, you see, and even when you see those deep fakes, there's loads going around online of like Tom Cruise even I find that a bit weird.
Yeah.
It's just a bit, and this just adds to the weirdness of it. And coming back to Laura's point, I think the whole AI world, metaverse world, is messing with your soul. It's messing with the human nature. And again, the point that we made earlier as well Aggie made was about moving on. People need to grieve. They need to move on. And you can imagine a lot of people here will hang on to the memories of loved ones for too long.
Are we all just Luddites here on the panel? Are we all just scared of technology? Anyway, we've got to move on. There's a TikToker who has claimed she was kicked out of a restaurant in Colorado for not wearing more clothes after other female diners were reportedly unhappy at her attire or lack thereof. And she made these claims in a video that has now been viewed more than 500,000 times on TikTok. She hit back at the women who made the complaints by joking that they were jealous that their husbands were staring at her. I mean, I have to be honest, when I read this story, I did kind of think to myself, this feels like the green-eyed monster, right? Is it not? What do you think, Aggie?
Oh, you know what? Americans are so weird. They're either Puritans or pornographers. There's,
sometimes both.
End of the scale. Yes, exactly. That's right. And I don't know. I mean, people should be able to go about however they want. It's not that bad. Picture, really.
I mean, I don't think anyone was... Well, no, the people in the diner were casting judgment. I mean, but what is it? It's not like they were in a church.
No,
I don't really understand, Tommy.
So does it depend on the type of restaurant? Was it like a dirty buns restaurant?
Wasn't it Hooters?
No, but you know what? They let her in, so it's okay for an establishment to have a dress code.
Yeah.
But it's not as though as she walked in, somebody said, "Excuse me, madam, we have a dress code and a skirt must be 2 inches above your knee." In which case, you could rightfully say, "Well, you're a very strange joint. I'm off."
Yeah, sure.
They let her in. It's only when there were complaints that they asked her to leave.
What do you think is going through those diners' minds? I mean, is it jealousy?
The men were looking and the women didn't like it. Her skirt's the skirt's not even that short. She's wearing tights that are kind of like have a sort of a suspender effect.
Yeah.
So it's a bit saucy, and I think that actually women were just probably disgruntled that the men were looking.
But I'm sort of
because
shocked.
she was allowed in, so it's not a dress code.
No, but why would you... Wouldn't you be embarrassed to go up and say, sorry, you have to leave, or to complain about what someone else is wearing in a restaurant? And that wouldn't even occur to me.
And if you listen to that clip, it's the waiter saying to her, you're getting up to go to the toilet quite a lot, the restroom quite a lot, and everybody can see your booty on display, because effectively her backside was kind of half hanging out.
Yeah, but I object to what people wear all the time, just on a matter of taste. I'm not going to go up and ask them to be kicked out of the restaurant.
It's not a great conversation point over dinner. It's the kind of thing, let's be honest, we'd all absolutely...
We'd love it.
Look, have you seen what she's wearing? Is it alluring or too much? It's just a conversation. No need to complain.
But it does feel like they're just shaming her, aren't they?
Or maybe she was just kind of looking for lots of hits on TikTok. Who knows?
Well, OK, there could be a cynical element to all of this, couldn't there? Maybe it didn't really happen. No, we have to assume it didn't happen.
Deep fake.
It could be a deep
shaming incident.
But that,
she might not even be real.
Yeah.
So she might be an AI avatar.
You know that there are avatars on Instagram. They're not real
I know,
models.
but this stuff terrifies me. It's bad enough dealing with the bots on Twitter, so you don't know if the abuse you're getting is real or from some farm.
I'm not real. Do you know?
Oh, you're just a hologram.
I'm a hologram.
Are you going to go and see this ABBA avatar thing where they're not actually there? It's just their holograms, and the tickets are through the roof.
Yeah. I quite like stuff like that. I think on a performance level, it's a great way of seeing old artists perform again. I don't mind that. I don't mind the Tupac thing as well.
Really? No, but that's a dead person.
Yeah, but he came out on stage with Snoop Dogg, and that
it was a hologram.
It doesn't matter. It's great.
I hate that.
I
think it's like
that's cool. That's entertainment.
Kind of deathly indentured servitude. It's appalling.
But I mean, that's a very grandiose way to put it, but fair enough.
Yes, darling. But this like the ABBA holograms. This is the way the world's going. It's very interesting. Right now you can buy perfume for the metaverse.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Obviously, it's not real perfume. You'll be able to smell it. You're in the metaverse. It will create an aura around you. I mean, tulip fever. Anyone? This is bonkers.
What's happened to the love of real life?
Yeah.
Why isn't part of the thrill of going to see someone perform that that's a real person. You're seeing them in the flesh.
Totally. I saw Culture Club one last week. They were amazing. It was so lovely to be at a real concert with real people.
Yeah.
Lulu was on stage as well. It's fantastic.
Lulu's still going.
Absolutely. 73 years of age as
Good
well.
for her.
But I think we have to acknowledge that there is this other space now. That's what and whilst I'm all for living and experiencing, and I worry about, again, what this does to the soul and the spirit and living through this digital space, there is this other space that our kids are exposed to. My kids live for their Minecraft, Roblox, all that. They're immersed in that world and they love it. So,
but they come through that. They do.
Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Let's
they
hope
come through that because then they want to be out in the real world, and, dating.
I just think they need to watch things like Terminator and Jurassic Park and know where this stuff leads.
Yeah.
You know, when you empower AI and robotic technology and digital technology, and it's all over for us.
People die.
I sound a bit like an Old Testament prophet there, so I'm sorry for being so doom-mongering. Let's move on now. We want to play our Great British Game Show. You may have heard former England footballer Gary Lineker's claim this week that he suffered racist abuse as a player because of his, quote, darkish skin. By the way, can I just come to... Do you think this was an idiotic comment?
It's not an idiotic comment. If he suffered racism, then he...
But he's white.
But I can see how he's got a darker complexion.
Right.
But I didn't know... I mean, I don't think it's an idiotic comment for him to say he suffered some sort of
Let's
abuse.
have a quick look at what he looks like. You got an image?
Oh, yeah.
I don't...
But he tans very well, I will say that. He does tan well. Yeah, and you know, if he got grief for it and he's coming out now, I think good on him for saying it.
Well,
can I just say something?
Yes, of course, Laura.
Slightly in his defence, and it's not really in my character to be particularly defending Gary Lineker. But my ex-husband was very, very dark-skinned for a white person, and he also was actually bullied at school for being black.
Oh.
But you have to remember, in lots of parts of this country, going back 30, 40 years, there were lots of areas you could be in villages where you would not really have black and ethnic minority people in school. So somebody who was a lot darker than the characteristic kids could be bullied.
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't really want to talk about this story. This is just a segue into idiotic things that celebrities have said. So it's not really about Gary Lineker at all. So I'm going to give you some idiotic quotes, and I want to see if my panel can guess which idiot said what. OK, so we'll start with this one. That would have been a goal had it gone inside the post. Now, I don't know much about football, but even I know that would have been that would make it a goal. Does anyone know who would have said that?
Oh, God, it could have been any terrible pundit at football.
You think it's got to be someone who knows about football, then?
Yeah, well...
Is it the one whose surname is Morgan?
OK, it's Michael Owen.
Michael Owen.
Really?
Yeah, afraid so. So we're going to move on to the next one. OK, so where's the Cannes Film Festival being held this year?
Very good. OK.
Brilliant.
Any thoughts?
No, I would hate to pin that on somebody because it's so stupid.
It is Christina Aguilera, so stupid is right. I can give you the point for that. What about this one? Where's Walmart, where they sell, like, walls and stuff? Any thoughts?
Got to be an American, I guess.
Yeah. Of course, it's Paris Hilton.
Oh.
Yeah, one of the more intellectual things that she said.
She's never been in a Walmart, presumably.
Let's move on to this one. When the ball is that still, it's wobbling in the air. I'm afraid that is also Michael Owen.
Oh, man. Poor Michael.
Redefining the laws of physics. He's having a right mare today.
Bless him.
Let's move on to this one. Under capitalism, man oppresses man. Under socialism, it's the other way round.
That's not Michael Owen.
That's not Michael Owen, no. For once, it isn't. It's actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Oh, good.
There we go.
Good, remember that one.
Let's move on to this.
That needs to be memes.
I've never really wanted to go to Japan simply because I don't like eating fish, and I know that's very popular out there in Africa. There's so much wrong with that.
That's an American.
That's a Towie. Is it a Towie? Oh, no, is it
No, it's an American. It is Britney Spears.
Oh,
brilliant.
If there's a bit of rain about, it makes the surface wet. I'm going to give you a clue. That's another football thing.
Right.
And it's not Michael Owen.
It is Michael Owen.
My God.
I'm afraid it is Michael Owen.
Now, I'd call this bullying Michael Owen.
I think when Michael Owen is saying such silly things, he deserves it. And we'll have this one now. We won the argument, but I regret we didn't convert that into a majority for change. Oh, you might get this one. Who do you think that is?
Is it a Liberal politician?
This is actually Jeremy Corbyn. Following Labour's worst electoral defeat since 1935. Well, anyway, that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for joining me for Mark Dolan tonight. Headliners is up next, so please join me after the break. I'll be hosting that, and we'll be running through all of tomorrow's newspapers for your delectation. See you in one moment. Farewell.
Hello, I'm Helen Roberts with your weather update, and it's turning quite unsettled this weekend, certainly in comparison with some recent days. We're all in for a mixture of sunny spells and showers, and some of those showers could well be on the heavy side, and it's all thanks to this area of low pressure. Very slow moving, it stays pretty much where it is through the course of the weekend and in fact into the start of next week. So back to the details for this evening and overnight. This band of cloud and rain moving northeastwards across the country. That's a cold front introducing some slightly cooler and fresher air for most of us as it trundles its way across the country. And that's good news if you've been struggling to sleep over some recent nights, feeling a little bit fresher and less humid than it has been. So as we start the weekend then, there will be a lot of fine weather around first thing, but quite quickly those showers breaking out, especially across western areas, and some of those showers will be heavy and possibly thundery. The best chance of staying drier and brighter is for East Anglia and the southeast of England, and this is also where we'll see the highest temperatures up into the low 20s. So for Saturday night and into the early hours of Sunday, we will keep a few showers around, but they will tend to ease away as the night progresses. Meanwhile, low pressure swinging yet another band of cloud and rain in from the west. So some thicker cloud and more persistent outbreaks of rain into western areas by the time we start Sunday. And for Sunday itself, it's more of the same really. Again, a mixture of some bright or sunny spells, but